Hey, this is Selina.
Hey, Burak here, and we're on the second part of our employee experience podcast. We want to start with a recap. Social experience and work experience we have mentioned in the last podcast as part of the four experiences of the umbrella employee experience. And building on, we're going to touch upon digital workplace experience and physical workplace experience today. So, Selina, help us remember social experience.
Mm. Well, we really went down the culture rabbit hole, and I think actually it became quite important because that element of relationships, the element of culture, what is available in organizations is such a significant contributor to how people feel. And when they show up at work, either physically or virtually, what it is that they're met with. What is the decisions that are being made? What are the conversations that are being had? How are people talking to each other and engaging? That's all about the culture, and that has such a huge influence on the experience.
And
Do
that
I
is
really feel like I
called,
belong?
yeah, and that is called social experience in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, of course, it's the work experience is the other part of that, which is what is the work I'm actually doing? How is it decided who's doing that work? And do I feel like I'm growing and learning and being enriched by the projects that I'm involved in?
And how we design the processes of performance management, learning and development, or any other process that actually touches our work day. A few things that we have also discussed about how to design them was to take into account when you're defining your culture, the culture or the social experiences that your employees and talent want to go through,
Mm,
not only the culture you want as an enterprise or as an executive team. So that was a very important aspect of social experience. For work experience, we also mentioned or emphasized the importance of user experience. So
mm,
please take into account the user experience during those mostly HR related processes. If possible, do a blank sheet design and start from an employee centric perspective. So those were
yep.
the highlights of the first two headings of employee experience.
Mm,
And now remains the workplace, physical workplace experience and
mm.
digital workplace experience. And we want to start with the physical workplace experience. I want to read a definition first because I like definitions, and we
I'll
then dive into that.
I'll see if I agree, and then maybe ask the
Right.
source. We'll
I
see.
mean, it's a good start of a conversation. And this definition is from Gallup. I'm quoting, providing a great workplace experience means optimizing the variety and character of spaces that people can choose from during the day and empowering them to make choices that optimize their individual performance.
Mm,
So there's a notion of choicefulness from a variety and character of spaces, and also the optimization of performance there. So what do you think?
mm. I think it's hugely important. I think that the biggest piece around the physical space is it supporting me to be more innovative, to be more thoughtful, for me to be in a place where I feel calm and safe and where I'm able to make better decisions. And the challenge for organizations is that means very different things for different people. Now, right now, it looks like we're both working from virtual places, so not in the physical office. Hugely different backgrounds. I'm just noticing very clean and tidy and monotone color, and it looks like chaos over at my place. Although I guess that's behind me, so I don't usually pay attention to it. But for me, that is a really important part of it. What are the things that inspire me as well? And that's the same thing as we're creating spaces in our headquarters and offices for more formal working. Do I have the tools there available for me to really actually do the work I want to do? I do one of the things, I was in the office a number of days this week, and what I love about getting into the office is grabbing that pen and being in front of the whiteboard and being with a group of my colleagues live again. So that physical space, the room that is actually conducive to us getting together, gathering, feeling like we can have meaningful conversations, and then actually the tools to do the work. I also believe now with elements around safety, not only from the pandemic in terms of cleanliness and management of germs, etc., but also safety in general in the work environment. How are we making sure as organizations that people do feel safe for their physical health while they're actually in the office as well?
You mean around ergonomics, exposure to sunlight, big windows, kind of?
The whole spectrum. So
Right.
all of those pieces in terms of mental health and what we know, and those are very good specific pieces because we know from the research that natural light, how important that is actually to how our brain is working and staying alert, but also even in the space, walking up the steps or, the elevator, that
Right.
is actually, it is safe. So both from a mental health, psychological perspective and then a physical health and safety perspective.
Right. And that's what we might put under the variety of the choicefulness as well. So it depends where you get from your health and safety from.
Mm.
And then the office place, the physical office place should actually give you that kind of choice or the variety. I think the one thing that I am a bit bothered about these definitions is the optimization of individual performance,
Say
and
more.
that's so. I've read through a lot of definitions, and they're very similar to Gallup. There's a notion of optimization of performance or getting the best performance out of the workers. Now, I don't think in this time and age the physical workplace is built for getting the most out of the worker. I think it's more, as you said, a place of connecting and bonding and safety. One of the things I also want to discuss with you is a beautiful quote that Airbnb CEO said, who has
Mm.
been leading in these progressive employee-centric practices. And I personally like that guy, Brian Chemsky. And what he says is that office as we know it is dead. Offices are something
Mm.
from 1950s. They will never come back.
Mm.
And the interesting question that he puts on the table is that if we were to reinvent offices, so imagine that we don't have offices at all. Let's think about what would be the purpose of an office from scratch without
Mm.
having all the legacy understanding of what offices are. That's a good question. What do you think? So how would you answer that question?
Well, I think it would be a great experiment, and also with provocation of saying what it should not be, because I think, my experience at offices, and we touched on this when we talked about the social experience, is this meeting place, is this place of building sense of trust and belonging, is this opportunity actually to, the whole brainstorming, getting
Mm.
together. However, that can create in-group and out-group as well. So how do we recreate and reimagine the physical space and enablement of creating that sense of belonging and connectivity without creating silos in the organization? I don't know any company that isn't fighting with silos. And I think fundamentally, part of the physical space is an influencer in us having difficulty breaking out of silos.
So the physical workplace, you think, is strengthening the silo thinking with
Well, I think it could
physical
be.
physical borders, or how's that?
So I think it's a risk. I'm not suggesting that it's an absolute, but
Mm,
if we think about the relationships that get built, that informal, handshake or welcoming hug from a colleague whom you haven't seen for a long time after the pandemic, it's creating bonds that are slightly different level from a relationship bond perspective. And then that trust builds in different ways, perhaps, than the virtual. Now, I've spoken many times about how I was proven totally wrong about the ability to create intimacy and trust and build those strong relationships virtually. I held a belief that that really only happened face to face, but I was proven wrong. During the pandemic, we built lots of strong relationships virtually. But the physical space, as we're going back, as you said, if we're going to reinvent what this physical space does, how do we create a greater balance between those that we are connecting with virtually and those that we're connecting with in person in that physical space? And I think your question is rooted in why the office? What
yeah,
happens there?
and I think it's a good start because he starts with the question like, if we didn't have any offices, would we invent them right now? Would
Mm,
anyone feel the need to invent them? And if yes, for what purpose? And I think that ties to what you're mentioning here. It is actually a good practice or like thinking from first principles, like why would we invent this? What
mm.
purpose it will serve? While we're doing that,
Well, this is something that you and I have talked about a number of times in terms of how are we actually, learning from the whole customer experience to inform and influence how we're then doing that human-centric design for employee experience. And I think organizations, regardless of like individual leader perspectives, like this is how I feel, we need to be looking at the research. And the research is pretty clear that the future is work environments that are, formal offices, sort of hub or satellite spaces, and then an opportunity for people to work virtually, whether that's a home office or some other selected place that's virtual, that's not in a formal office or actually hub. And organizations need to understand that different types of work happens at different places. And as you said, different people have different interests or styles and ways of learning and taking in information. So they will be choiceful about where and when they do their work. So I think this actually links back to, the really generative part of performance management. If we're clear with each other about what's the work that needs to get done, what's the output, what's the impact that we want to create,
hmm,
leaders and organizations should be less interested in how that impact is created, how that result is created, in what actually, where you're actually sitting, what's the chair you're sitting in, versus being really mindful of actually that performance happening or impact value creation for the company. And I think that's the most important part for us now as leaders and organizations to take a step back and, to your point, not just think about, efficiency and effectiveness of every cog in the wheel, but really being clear around expectations, that contracting. So at Ericsson, we talk about a leadership deal, and we will definitely talk about sort of the deal as it pertains to the employee experience, which is that contracting piece that we talked about earlier in the social. And my ability to select. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody, if you're in an ecosystem, there also has to be an appreciation that
I need
organizations might
I need
take a
to
perspective.
I need to clarify a few things
Yeah.
here for
Okay.
myself. I think it's a beautiful point when you're saying we need to identify the purpose of our work,
Mm,
because even within the organization, different units might have different purposes and that require different ways of working. So when
mm,
you're designing the space, have that in mind. And while defining that purpose, you're saying we need to be careful about contracting with the leader.
Mm.
And that's something that you need to explain a little bit more for myself
Yeah.
because you were
So
on
I'm
that. So that's how it ties to workplace environment. And then once we have that contract, then it will go and feed back to the design of the workplace. Is that the
yeah.
thinking? Okay.
Yeah, and it's both the employee and the leader doing that contracting as well as the organization. So I think one thing I am hearing is that some organizations, they're demanding people to be in the office, or they're being sort of flexible and saying 50-50, or to your Airbnb, they're saying, toss it out. I don't ever expect you to come back to the office.
Yeah.
Regardless of what, as an organization, you're choosing, as I've said before, I think in the social piece is around being clear around what informs that decision. And I think organizations, back to my point around looking at the research and understanding it and using that, if we're not sharing what has informed why we're choosing what type of options we are giving to employees, I think there will be great resistance. And that's where, this threat of continued great resignation will hit those organizations better. Not necessarily the ones who say, okay, forget it, you never have to come back to the office. I'm not sure that that's the 100% right solution.
True.
What I do believe is right is that we're clear on what informs whatever decision there is there as an organization and as a leader.
Uh, what we said is that there are different physical spaces. Hubs could be home, could be in between places, like
Mm,
satellite offices. So that's one variable. The second variable is the purpose of the
mm,
work. So
yes.
you can be an agile team of developers, or you need to work together, versus you can be a team of accountants where your information flow should only be transactional.
Mm,
So that kind of the purpose of work is the second variable. And the third variable is the personas. So you can, how you choose the work. So you might be interested in complete silence in the first 4 hours and then want to socialize only 1 hour, or you're an extrovert and you want to socialize with people mostly into the world and then do the work at some point else.
oh, there
Or
I have to just check in. Maybe not socialize. Talking to each other isn't necessarily not doing the work.
true, 100%, and such a minefield. We need to be careful about what we say. I know, or different personas, right? It's like depending on your age, interest, where you are at life, or how you like
Absolutely.
your setup. So some people want to work with three monitors. Some people are just happy
Mm,
with their laptop screen. Um, so there are three variables. That means that the whole combination and creating choicefulness or variation becomes a very difficult design problem. Also
mm,
keeping in mind the cost element
mm.
of that. So we can't create an amazing office for everyone and then it's going to cost a huge
Absolutely.
amount.
Yeah.
So that
Mm,
means then when you say it needs to have informed decisions behind all of those designs, and that kind of leads to an expertise about
mm,
physical workspace. And that we don't see that much in the organizations, right? I think it's more like given in the hands of good intellectual common sense people
mm.
rather than deep experts of the topic.
Yep. And I think what you're suggesting is we need to get those experts in, and I fully agree. I mean, I think just like there's so much more documented research on hospitals, for example, and the rate of recovery depending on the environment that's there, I have to believe there's some correlations that we should be using, in the workspace around, what does make for an environment where people are feeling more engaged. I mean, for me, I think what's beautiful is you're seeing much more live plants in
Right.
offices, for example. And of course, the ever important good cup of coffee. So how are we making sure that those sort of basic things are there in that
Yeah.
physical space, and that we're getting both behavioralists, we're probably getting some engineers, in use some type of interior designers that have, the data and actually
Yeah.
experience and expertise in creating that space. I would add about the workspace before we go to the digital, is that also creating an inclusive space.
Oh, yeah.
So which means accessibility, and that,
Totally.
organizations are really thinking about how to make sure everybody can actually physically get into those spaces in a safe way.
A lot of organizations will be now half physical, half virtual. So half of your team
Mm,
will be in the headquarters, and another half will be spread out in some geography.
mm,
That inclusivity during any meeting is also
mm,
very important. I know that Google was designing these big screens that everyone who dials in to the
beep,
meeting
beep, beep, beep.
has these big screens that they are like as a person in the room, and they also
Mm,
experience it like that. So that
mm,
inclusivity has also many aspects. Again, probably giving another layer of complexity of the
mm.
challenge. Get experts. All right.
Yeah. But
Uh,
that is the good segue to the digital piece,
yeah,
because that's enabled by our technology. And
because I said dialing in.
yes,
1996 was a
exactly.
good year. Good year for
Well, at
digital.
least
Yeah.
so
Not
those
many
are
people
maybe
know that anymore.
dating me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So say a little bit more about the importance of digital and what we're actually talking about when we're saying how important.
Yeah, I think the definition of a digital workspace experience or digital experience is, I think we as a species now going towards a more and more digital presence, our digital twins with whole conversations around metaverse. So I'm not going to go into that, but there's a reality of part of our lives are in digital, and part of our work lives are also in digital, and that part is growing. Now, there's also a reality that the digital experience that we are experiencing in our daily lives as consumers is huge. That is called the consumer grade experience. Whenever you want to buy something from Amazon with a click, or with Netflix, that everything kind of is served with a very clean interface. Everything is easy with any Apple device. With 3 clicks, you can actually download and reach to an Apple TV series. It only takes from scratch 3 clicks. So those are consumer grade experiences. When we usually come to the office digital environment, when we log into our intranets or these SAP systems, then there's a huge difference there. I never had anyone saying that, wow, it's so joyful to connect to our HR infrastructure and then do stuff there. I love it. It's like one click and you're there. I've never heard about that. So that difference is a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I think that difference should be minimized. That user experience and simplicity of frictionless application experience should be replicated in our digital environments. That's kind of the first rule of the digital ecosystem. So I'm going to stop there. I know that resonates with you because
Mm.
we've been exchanging frustrations about that platform and this platform, or you clicked on that button, it doesn't make sense. Why is that button there? Kind of frustrations
I don't
are
know
in
what you're
place.
talking about. Have
It wasn't you. It was another company,
yeah.
another person.
It's
Another.
that friend
Yeah,
or
that friend.
story.
Yeah, but there's a difference of that. of that experience quality in our daily life versus in our work life.
Absolutely. And it does have such a huge influence. And maybe we don't have to say so much more about the digital piece, except that if we have platforms and technology that aren't supporting the work, it's amazing how frustrating that is
Yeah.
for employees and how much then that detracts from everything else that we've been talking about. If my computer is not enabling me to do the work at the speed that I would like to do it or whatever, um, it starts to create a sense of resentment for employees. So, organizations need to be very mindful of what that consumer grade experience
Yeah.
really means at your organization, which will mean different things. I mean, we're a IT tech company, so of course the expectations are higher. And when it doesn't meet those expectations, it's almost more disappointing. Perhaps other organizations, the level of expectation is not as high. I mean, when we went into the pandemic, we were all quite familiar with using a platform to have virtual conversations and meetings already. So our transition went quite quickly. For others, it wasn't as quickly. But then the important part to marry then is also when we're talking about the physical workspace, that from a digital perspective, the security becomes a very important topic as well.
Mhm.
So how are we saying secure from a information perspective as we're working in these different environments?
Yeah. And it's going to be more and more important, the security aspect. I I think you're touching on a beautiful point when you say how frustrating it can be, any low grade of experience that we're having in our digital work life, because it's consistently there. Imagine that you had an amazing onboarding, but the next 3 years, the the screens that you are using to do your job are horrible. Imagine that you are a recruiter and you have to do manual work every time you met with a new candidate. That bad interface is there every day
Mm,
versus an onboarding experience can be amazing your first 2, 3 months, and then the bad interface will be bothering
mm,
you every day. So that's the actually the importance of the digital workplace. I think that the digital experience should provide is the easy access of knowledge, because you also mentioned that do I
mm,
have the right tools at the right time to do my job, and that's mostly knowledge. And in big companies it's really hard to reach to that person who knows that specific stuff. It takes like
mm.
15 emails to reach out to the right source of information. And imagine in our daily life we just Google stuff.
I think it's one of the most important value creations that getting the digital aspect is right. I mean,
Yeah.
knowledge sharing is probably the biggest drain of resources and value in most organizations or lack thereof,
Yeah.
knowledge sharing.
Inf-
And in today's
information.
environment, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just about the digital piece.
Yeah. There's also the new fancy term called asynchronous communication. You leave a note, a voicemail, or a short video for your team, and then when they are available, they reply back to you. Could be a decent chat environment like Slack, or a good kind of video or voice-based asynchronous communication. That's going to be more and more important. I
Mm.
think people who are working with or in Slack will be angry at me that I just said Slack is a chat program. I think it's more than that. So, as a summary, frictionless digital user experience, knowledge availability, and asynchronous communication are the three elements. And the fourth, you said also security should be there. Have I missed something?
I think that those actually segue to maybe us wrapping up and linking back to the whole four areas that we've been talking about around social, around the actual work, around the physical space and the digital space. This frictionless consumer grade experience is in essence If we talk about this blank sheet of paper, I like to say with clear philosophies, like
Mm,
what you actually believe in to do that work in advance, then that is at the heart of creating a positive employee experience. And a positive employee experience is the most important risk mitigation right now as we're seeing mobility massively around the world, but different for different reasons in different pockets. And for organizations to think about both attracting and retaining the talent that they need to be future fit and ready for the competitive landscape in the future.
true. Beautiful summary. I think
Hmm,
that just defines the end of the second part, and I think the end of the overall employee experience episodes.
cool. Well, I think we have to say good luck because this is no easy task for organizations, but I think very much we believe worth the investment.
Get experts. Those help.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for today.